The nationalist movement in Indo-China. In the first part, we done the how it emerged from the shadow of the China, the colonial dominations of France and its resistance in Vietnam, and the question raised in France that should colonies be developed or not. The dilemma of colonial education. Why French give education or make the Vietnamese educated? What they were saying that they were claimed that they were bringing modern civilizations to Vietnam, and so it is their duty, and they took the granted also that it was their duty of the Europeans to introduce the modern ideas of the colony, even if this meant destroying the local culture also, the local religion or the local traditions. But what they thought that they are more civilized than these people, so it is their duty that they have to educate them and civilize them. But education was seen as one way to civilize the native. The problem was
Actually, the French needed an educated local labor force, but they feared that education might create some problem, like maybe they begin to question the colonial domination revolution also. When they become educated, rich, the new middle class start raising question against the aristocracy. And obviously the second thing is that French citizens who were living in Vietnam, they were called colons, and these colons began fearing that they might lose their jobs if the Vietnamese become educated. Now let's talk about the modern. To consolidate their power in Vietnam, the French systematically dismantled the traditional education system of Vietnam, and what they want is to establish French schools for the Vietnamese. Now the policymakers emphasize here to education should be given in French language. What they felt by learning the language of Vietnamese would be introduced to the culture and civilization of France, and that thing helped them. But they also want respect to French language and the French sentiments and the ideas. Now, to see the superiority of the French culture and work for the French, what they do is that Vietnamese would be taught in lower classes only, and in the higher classes, the French language would be introduced so that the level of the French would be maintained, and people see French language as a respect that after clearing particular class means 10th class they were able to read learn French language. It is not easy to educate themselves in French language. Before that uh, we have to complete 10th class for example. So this is how a feeling of respect come for French language.
There were a lot of drawbacks of the education system of French. Only a small section of the population could enroll in the school, and very few among those admitted ultimately to pass the school leaving examination. The main reason behind it is that they adopted the policy of deliberate, or they deliberated the policy of failing the students, so that the Vietnamese get education in French language. They understand the French culture, they adopted the French culture, but they could not easily get the degree. So they failed them. If we see their textbook, then what the textbook they introduced, the whole textbook glorified the French culture, French society, and justified the colonial rule. It washing the brain, means it brainwashed the people of the Vietnam that it is good for these people that French came here because they came here to civilize these Vietnamese. In these books, the Vietnamese were represented as primitive and backward, and they were only capable for labor work. In these schools, children were told that only French rule could ensure peace in Vietnam. As they want that the French become modern. If they become modern, as you can see here in this picture, also like the boy, haircut, small haircut, wearing French dresses like t-shirt, pants, shoes, playing tennis. This is a French flag. You can see here. Means to develop a French culture, a French society, so that now what this boy demand for these types of French products, and this is how it helps the French trade also. For this they introduced 20 free schools in the year 1907 to provide the Western style of education to Vietnamese. This education include like science, hygiene, the French society, French culture, etc. The school were encouraged the adoption of the Western styles, such as having a short haircut, as you can see here in this picture, this type of Western hairstyle. But here the Vietnamese meant it a major break with their own identity, with their tradition, and that is why we also see resistance in schools. The teachers and students did not blindly follow the curriculums. Sometimes we see a silent resistance. The Vietnamese teachers quietly modified the textbook and criticized what was stated in these books. And there was a Vietnamese girl incident when a Vietnamese girl was terminated over the issue of front seat. She won the front seat, but the teacher gave the front seat to a French student, and for this reason the girl was terminated over this issue. The whole school protested for this and forced the authorities to take back that girl, and it was the victory of the educated class. We see first time this type of resistance in France. Students fought against the colonial government's efforts to prevent the Vietnamese from qualifying the white collar jobs. By the 1920s, what we see that students were forming various types of political parties in Vietnam, such as the parties what we see during that time is Young Anand to awake the people against the colonial government. They started publishing nationalist journals also. There was a journal which was published by these students like Anani's student. The French sought the strengthen and their rule in Vietnam, but they thought that Vietnam through the education they can control the Vietnam, and on other hand the educated class wanted to use education as a means to fight against the colonial rule also. And this is how we see that schools become an important place for political and cultural battle in Vietnam. On other hand, in India, the situation was different. Here we see the streets become the main place where the political leaders play a very important role in India. But here in Vietnam, the educated class play a very important role, and school become the battleground. That's all in the second part of the chapter. Any kind of problem and doubt, you can send your comment to me or to our website edunetworking.com. We will definitely reply you, or you can also demand for anything else, whatever you want. That's all in second part. Thank you.